What's up guys, I'm a caveman. In this video I'm going to show you how to install ExtremeRate's DIY replacement shells for the Switch OLED. That means I'll be replacing the backplate, the kickstand, the bottom piece of the Switch, the Joy-Cons, and its buttons. These kits are actually one of the first to be released in the market for the Switch OLED. ExtremeRate also has shells for the standard Switch, Switch Lite, Joy-Cons, and the Switch Pro controllers. First, let's see what's included in the box, and then I'll move on into the installation process. At the moment, for the Switch OLED shells, there's a few colors to choose from. Some are transparent and some are solid. The color I have is called Emerald Green. I was debating between this one and the Atomic Purple. I ended up going with Emerald Green because it just caught my attention more. It honestly looks great, and it'll look better once it's installed. This is the kickstand, and just like the rest of the parts, they're more of a foggy transparent, which is why it looks kind of blurry since it's not fully transparent. The kickstand is thicker than the original, which I think is pretty cool. This is the backplate. It's looking really clean and smooth. This is the bottom piece of the Switch. To install it, you'll have to disassemble and then reassemble the Switch. Once I open this up, I can show the rest of the parts that are included. In the package, you'll find screws for the Switch and the Joy-Cons. If you'd like, you can still use the original screws. There's one crosshead and one tri-ring screwdriver included. The crosshead is silver and the tri-wing is gold. They both have some grip on it, and the bottom piece spins. For this installation, I decided to use a different crosshead screwdriver. It's smaller and included in one of their other kits. These are buttons, covers, and pads for the Switch. You can mix and match with the original parts if you want. These are the multicolored buttons for the Joy-Cons, and that's only included for the A, B, X, Y, and directional buttons. These are the transparent emerald green buttons. The only ones not included are the sync or pairing buttons, which are located on the rails of the Joy-Cons, and also the release buttons that are located on the back of the Joy-Cons. The rest of the buttons will be transparent, and that includes the L and R buttons. For this installation, I'll be using the transparent ones. I can put this to the side for now. These are the Joy-Con shells, which also include the middle piece. The bag with the Joy-Con screws also has extra springs in case you need them. In the gamer manual, you can read about the warranty, where you can find the installation guide, and other kinds of information. And the last thing is a triangle prying tool. That was everything in the package, and now I can start the installation process. Keep in mind that you're going to be working with small electrical components. Take your time and be very careful when doing this installation. Now that I removed the Joy-Cons, I'm going to start by disassembling the kickstand. I'm going to put these to the side and get my tools ready. If you have different tools that are going to help you, I recommend using them. Laying the Switch on something soft is also going to help protect your screen. Now I can start by lifting up the kickstand. On the left side, you're going to find the covers for the hinges. It's 2 pieces on the left side and 2 pieces on the right side. You'll find that there's 1 screw on each side. I'm going to remove both of them, and most of these are with the crosshead. There isn't that many for the tri-wing. These screws are very tiny, so if you're going to use the originals, keep them in a safe spot. Now I'm going to use my prying tool to take off the top covers. Here's a quick look at what the top covers look like. This one was a little loose, so it came off easily. Usually it's harder the first time it's done. To take off the bottom covers, I'm going to use my tool to push them downwards. They're going to slide down, and after that you'll be able to grab them. Flipping the switch is going to help to get them out. Now there's 4 screws that need to be removed, 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side. Once those screws are removed, the kickstand can easily be taken out. To remove the backplate, you're going to start by using the tri-head to remove 2 screws. I accidentally turned my switch on, so just make sure that your switch is completely off. I'm switching back to the crosshead to remove 2 screws at the bottom of the switch. After that, there's 1 screw at the top. On the rails, there's going to be 3 screws to remove on the left and the right side. Using this method is going to make it easier for the back plate to come off. Now I can carefully grab the rail and lift it up. Inside, you're going to see a tiny opening. Inside that opening, you'll be able to see a buckle that keeps the back plate secure. I'm going to use my tri-wing screwdriver to push into the buckle and towards the back plate. You're going to see that on that side of the back plate, it came out a little bit, and that's what we need. Once that's done, the railing can go back in place. The 2 screws that are going back in are the middle and the bottom ones. The only one that's not going back in is the one at the top. Now I'm going to remove the 3 screws from the other rail. Once again, I need to lift up the railing. I'm going to push in the buckle that's in the opening and push it towards the back plate. If done correctly, you won't be able to see the buckle anymore. Just like I did in the other side, I'm going to put the screw in for the bottom, the middle, and not the one at the top. Because we pushed the buckles in, it created a gap between the railing and the back plate. We can easily get in there using a prying tool and start pushing out the back plate. There's a chance you'll also have to push through the top part, but luckily for me, I didn't have to do that. We also gotta try and get into this bottom part right here. When the tool gets in, I have to push towards the top. After that, just keep pushing up and it'll come out. If it doesn't, you probably just have to wiggle it around somewhere around that part. And that's how you remove the Switch OLED backplate. Now there's some parts that we have to remove from the backplate, and that's going to be the metal hinges, the dust-proof nuts, the part that keeps the game card cover secured, the brightness sensor, the rubber pad for the power and volume buttons. You can choose to remove those buttons. I'm going to be using the transparent ones. This little bag includes everything else I need that I'm going to use on the new back shelf. To remove the left side hinge, I'm going to remove 2 screws. Same thing goes for the right one. After that, if you pick up the plate, the hinges will slide right off. For this part, there's only 1 screw to remove. After that, you can try to grab it, or you can use something to try and push it off. I'm going to use the new game card cover, so I'm going to leave the black one there. Now I'm going to remove the rubber pad. The brightness sensor can be pulled out of its slot. Here's a close look at the black volume button and the transparent volume button. There's 2 dust-proof nuts that need to be removed. Each one has 2 screws, so that's a total of 4 screws that need to be removed. You can easily grab the dust-proof net once both screws have been removed. And the process is the same for the one on the right side. Parts we took out are going to go into the new back shell. I'm going to start by putting the dust-proof net that belongs on the left side. First, I'm going to place it into its slot. After that, I'm going to secure it with 2 screws. Once again, I'll repeat the process for the right side. The next part is the game card cover. I'm going to pass the bottom part of the cover through the gap. Once it's through, I can place it down and keep the cover closed. Now I can grab the part that keeps my cover secured. There is a slot that it's going to be placed down on. When placing it down, there's one side that looks like it has a curve. You want to make sure that that curve is facing downward. It should be able to go in easily. Once all of that is done, you have to secure it with 1 screw. The next part is the brightness sensor. This process is pretty simple, you just have to slide it into the slot. The next step is to put the power button and the volume button in their slot. You can see that there's a bit of plastic that sticks out. When putting the button in, that little plastic piece should be sticking out on the top right. When putting the volume button in, the plastic piece needs to be on the bottom left. After that, you can put the rubber pad back on. The pad has a bit of rubber that sticks out, and that needs to be on the bottom left. And on the right, there's two holes that are going to help secure the rubber pad. The next step is to install the metal hinges. There's one side of the hinge that's longer than the other. That's the side that's going to be screwed in. First, I'm going to pass the smaller side through the opening, and then the longer side can be matched up with the screw holes. Once that's done, you can secure it with two screws. Now repeat the process for the left side hinge. This is what it should look like once everything is installed. You can also test out the hinges. And one last piece I wanted to transfer into the new shell was this little tiny fluffy piece. I'm able to stick it back down, so I'm going to place it right here. Now that everything is installed for the back shell, I can move on to replacing the bottom shell of the Switch. This is the part that's going to get more difficult. You're definitely going to have to be really careful and patient. Take your time, and if you ever have to take a break during this process, it would be a good idea to do that. To disconnect these two cables, I'm using a different prying tool. First, I'm going to disconnect the one on the right side. With my tool, I can carefully get underneath the cable. What I'm aiming for is to gently push up on the gold connection. Same thing goes for the cable on the left. In this area, there is a screw hiding underneath the cable. I want to move the cable aside just enough to reveal that screw. Soon we're going to remove that screw along with the other ones. I decided to use a pair of tweezers for this part. There's a white sticker covering one of the screws. I'm going to use my tweezers to take it off. If the tweezers don't work, use something else that has better grip. Get ready for a hand workout because for this step there's a total of 10 screws that need to be removed. Alright, all screws have been removed. Now I can start to carefully and slowly lift up the protective metal board. As I'm doing the left side, I'm keeping my eye on the right side since there's a cable that I need to watch out for. If you take a closer look at the right side, you can see the wire is secured inside a slot. For this part, I'm going to grab my tweezers. Even though I'm using metal tweezers, I would recommend using plastic ones, or maybe even a different plastic tool to get the wire out. When removing the metal plate, you want to make sure that there's two spots that the wire isn't going to get caught on. One of those spots is right here, and the other spot is right here. But once that's done, you'll be able to take the plate out easily. After that's done, don't lay it down right away. You're going to notice that underneath it, there's some thermal paste. You don't want that getting messy. It would be a good idea to lay it down facing up. The thermal paste can be replaced with fresh thermal paste, but since it's not worn out, I'm going to reuse it. The first thing that should be done when the plate is off is to disconnect the battery. I'm going to use my prying tool to get underneath the white battery connection, and please be careful with any of these connections. You don't want to damage any of them. Once I'm underneath, I can push up on the cables and make my way towards the connection. You can move it a little bit to the side and then move on to the next step. Now we need to disconnect this board. It can bend easily, by the way, so please be careful. If you look at the black pad, underneath that area is where the connection is located. Around this area is where I'm going to use my tool and carefully push up. After it's been disconnected, you can grab it and put it to the side. We're going to be working near the thermal paste, and we want to keep it as contained as possible. Just keep an eye on it so it doesn't accidentally get moved around. For this step, there's 3 screws to remove. Now we can start to remove the radiator along with the heatsink. I'm going to use my tool to get underneath it and gently push up. Once it's loose enough, you should be able to grab it and lift it up. Underneath the heatsink, there's more thermal paste. When lifting it up, try doing it exactly on that area. Once that's done, don't lay it down right away. The heatsink needs to be placed on the metal plate that we took off earlier. On one side you can see that there's gray thermal paste. If you flip it over, you'll see that that side has more of a pink or brown colored paste. The metal plate has the same colored paste. You want to match up the colors and lay the heatsink right on top of that spot. For this next step, there's a couple cables that need to be disconnected. It's very important that you don't damage these cables. Depending which one gets damaged is going to depend on how it's going to affect your switch. Now I'm going to use my prying tool to unlock the connection that's securing the cable. Once it's unlocked, the cable can be pulled out. One method of being able to do this is by using a piece of tape. You can stick it to the cable and then try to slide the cable out. If you have a good tape, this part can be pretty easy. Once that's done, it should look something like this. I'm moving on to the next cable and I'm going to unlock it the same way. I'm using a different method to disconnect the cable. The tape I have at the moment isn't that great, but I do recommend using the tape method to be on the safe side. I'm using my tool to push on the edges from both sides. Before I move on, I'm going to put this cable to the side a little bit. This third connection is being unlocked the same way. I'm trying another method for this cable. I'm using my tweezers, and these are metal tweezers, but I would recommend using plastic ones. And I think ones that aren't pointy would be better. As long as you're able to get that cable out, the plastic one should be fine. And with this method, using the tweezers, I gripped onto the sides of the cable. I didn't apply too much pressure, and I gently started to pull the cable out. For the next one, I'm going to unlock it and use the tweezers again. As you can see, that one was kind of tricky, but I was able to get it out carefully. Since this board is going to be moved, I'm going to use a piece of tape to stick the cable onto the fan so that the cable is out of the way. And this is what it should look like. Here's the last cable that's going to be disconnected. It's going to be unlocked the same way again, and I'm going to use my tweezers after to pull it out. I'm going to use a piece of tape to stick the cable onto the battery. Alright, so now I'm going to double check that everything is good. I can see one of the cables with the tape didn't stick well enough. I'm going to stick it back down onto the fan. And also double check on the other one so it doesn't come loose. And with that done, I can move on to the next step. 3 screws are going to be removed. There's a cable blocking the screw, and I want to move it enough to be able to get that screw out. Next, I'm going to remove 3 more screws. After that's done, I'm going to get underneath the board around this area using my plastic tool. I need to carefully push it up and just enough so that I'm able to grab it. I'm going to keep holding the board up and then pull on the bottom plate of the Switch. This is being done so that I can safely pull the board away. Keep in mind there's still cables connected to the board. Try not to rush it and be patient. Now I can use a piece of tape to stick the board to the fan to help keep it in that position. After that's done, I only have one more screw to remove. Now I can grab the bottom plate and pull it away from the Switch. Here's the new bottom plate or bottom shell that I'm going to use. I usually call these pieces shells, but sometimes I switch between calling them plates or shells. This is the rubber pad that I'm going to put into the shell. You can also use the original ones or mix and match with both of them. As you can see, there's a very noticeable curve on the pad and the shell. When inserting the pad into its slot, the curve of the pad is going to match up with the curve of the shell. All you have to do is just push it in there. And the pad should be sticking out a little bit since that is the grip for the bottom. That process has to be repeated one more time. The bottom shell is ready to be placed down. When placing it down, the curves of the shell should be facing towards you or away from the Switch. Also, the screw holes of the Switch and the shell need to match up. You should be able to feel when it falls into place. At the moment, I'm going to secure it down with one screw. The tape holding the board can be removed. Now the board needs to be placed back down. As I'm placing it down, I'm going to be pulling on the bottom shell. This is going to make it easier for the charging port to fall into place. Once it's in position, check that the charging port and the board are placed down correctly. You also want to check that the cables that were disconnected earlier are not underneath the motherboard. Now I'm going to put in two screws next to the charging port and then another screw that holds down the bottom shell on the right side. If the thin cable is in the way, move it enough so that it doesn't get trapped in between the bottom shell and the Switch. There's 3 more screws to put in. I'm going to place this screw in just a little bit and then get the cable out of the way. After that, I can take off the tape from the cables. The next step is to reconnect the cables to the board. I'm going to be using my metal tweezers again, and I know I already mentioned this, but I would recommend using plastic ones. I'm going to get it into the connection just a little bit and then try to push it in from there. I'm not applying too much pressure, I'm just carefully pushing it from side to side until it goes in. To secure the cable in its position, I'm going to bring down the lock. This is what it should look like when it's locked in. This cable can be a little tricky. I'm using my finger to help me get it into a better position. After that, just like before, I'll use my tweezers and lock it down. Out of all the cables, I think this is the easiest one to reconnect. Repeat the process for the rest of the cables, and if you have a better way of reconnecting them, definitely go for it. That was a tough process to go through, but at least it's going to get easier. For this step, I need my radiator plus heatsink. I'm going to place it down, but before I do, I need to make sure that the side with the thermal paste is facing downward. I'm going to start by placing down the radiator first. After that, I'm going to align the screw holes on the heatsink with the ones on the board. I'm lightly tapping on the radiator to make sure that it's in place. Once it's in position, I can put in the 3 screws near the heatsink. This board can be placed back down. It has a connection on the bottom, so you want to make sure that connection is facing downward or towards the switch. This is where the board is going to be connected. Be very careful because this board can bend easily. When placing it down, try your best to align both connections. Once it feels like it's in a good position, you can start to lightly tap down, and if done correctly, you'll feel it connect to the board on the bottom. You can also check if the screw holes on the board match with the ones on the switch. After all of that is done, we can finally reconnect the battery. I'm going to push down the white part of the cable into that black connection on the board. After the battery has been reconnected, I'm going to grab my metal plate and place it back down. The side that has the thermal paste should be facing downward. On the top right corner of the switch, you're going to see an empty space. The cable in the top right corner of the metal plate is going to go inside there. The method I'm using to place it down is by aligning the bottom screw holes of the plate with the ones of the switch. Since there's thermal paste underneath, I'm not laying it down until I'm 100% sure that it's in the correct position. Overall, you want to make sure that that cable is in the correct spot and that your screw holes are aligned. For the next step, we're going to reconnect the 2 cables on the metal plate onto the board. For the first cable, I'm going to use my tweezers to place it right on top of the connection. Once that's done, I'm going to use my tool to push it down. I'm going to repeat that process one more time for the other cable. When it's done, it should look something like this. Now I need to put all screws back in to secure the metal plate. After all screws are back in, I can grab the new back shell. I'm done working on the inside, which means that I can finally install it. First thing I want to focus on is getting the dust-proof nets through the bottom shell. To make it easier for them to go through, I'm going to pull on the bottom shell. This is going to create enough space for them to get through. If done correctly, the screw holes on the back shell should align with the ones underneath it. It's not fully installed yet, but this is already looking amazing. The top left and right side of the shell still need to be pushed down. I'm going to start by doing the right side and then the left. It can be easy just by pushing it down, but sometimes the buckles of the shell can get stuck. I don't want to force it in this way, so pushing the buckle would be a better idea. Any tool can be useful just as long as you don't damage the buckle, and you also don't need to push too hard for this. After that's done, the top should be able to close easily. If it gets stuck, it could possibly be because of the button pads. Now that the back shell has been installed, we need to secure it with some screws. I'm going to start by putting in the 2 tri-wing screws. Now I'm going to use my crosshead driver. On the left and right railings, I'm going to put 1 screw each. I got 2 screws for the bottom and 1 for the top. Once all those screws are back in, I can install the kickstand. First, I'm going to align the screw holes with the hinges. I need to put 2 screws on the left and 2 screws on the right. Unfortunately, I couldn't find 2 of my original screws, but that's okay since there's extra screws included in the kit. Let's give it a quick test to see how the kickstand is working out. It's closing smoothly and looking good. Like I mentioned earlier, this stand is thicker than the original, so it is going to look a bit different. Also remember that you can use the original kickstand with the back shell. If you do plan on using the original kickstand, they do sell the back shell and bottom shell without the kickstand included. The next step is covering up the hinges. There's 2 pieces for each side, so you should have a total of 4. We're going to take a quick look at the bottom covers. If you take a close look, you'll see that there's a tiny R on one of them, and on the other one there should be a tiny L. L is for the left side and R is for the right side. I'm going to start with the bottom left cover. The cover has one end that's wider than the other. I need to pass that through the opening that's under the hinge. After that, you can push the cover into the middle part of the hinge. And this is what it should look like when it's done. You'll see that the cover curves along with the hinge. Now that process has to be repeated for the right side. The next step is to install the top covers. You'll be able to see that both of them have 1 screw hole. The right cover is going to have the hole on the left side, and the left cover is going to have the hole on the right side. To install the top cover, I can just slide it onto the top of the hinge. It'll fall into place once you push it down towards the kickstand. Once that's done, it should look something like this. I still need to secure it down, but I'm going to put the top left cover first. Now that both of them are on, I'm going to secure them with one screw on each side. Once that's done, since it's secured, if you pull on it, you won't be able to take it out. Finally, after completing all steps, my kickstand is completely installed, along with the back shell and the bottom shell. So now that the Switch is done, I can move it out of the way and start working on the Joy-Cons. The left one is a little easier, so I'm going to do that one first. The first step is to use the tri-wing driver to take out 4 screws from the back of the Joy-Con. After that, I'm going to grab my plastic tool and get in between the front shell and the rail. I'm going to carefully push up on that side and then push up on the other sides. When that's being done, you're going to see a gap between the front shell and the back shell. Once the back shell is loose enough, I can move it to the left side. I can't separate it yet since there's still cables connected to it. Now I'm going to remove the rail from the back shell by removing one screw. Once it's loose, you should be able to just pull it away. I'm going to grab the release button since I'm going to use that for the new back shell. Next, I'm going to replace the S buttons with the new transparent ones. To do that, I'm going to start by removing 2 screws from the board that's connected to the rail. Now I can use my tweezers to remove the rubber pads and the S buttons. My sync or pairing button accidentally came off. I can show where it goes just in case it happens to anybody else. I need to get my S buttons out of here, so I'm going to use a wire cutter. If you want, you can use your fingers to twist off the buttons, but I prefer to use the wire cutters so that there isn't extra plastic on the sides. Here's a close look at the new SL and SR buttons. Now from the original ones, I need to take the rubber pads and put them into the new ones. The first button I'm going to put in is SL. If you look closely at the button, you'll see that there's a bit of plastic that sticks out. The rail has a specific spot for that little piece of plastic to fit into. All I have to do is align it correctly and just drop my button in there. You're going to notice that SR looks a little bit different. Unlike the other one, this one has two little pieces of plastic that are sticking out. But just like before, I'm going to align it to the specific spot on the rail and drop my button in. I didn't drop it down correctly, so I'm just going to use my tweezers to adjust it. But once that's done, I'll end up with SL installed in the upper part and SR in the lower one. The next step is to place down the board that goes in the rail. Once it's aligned correctly, I can secure it down with 2 screws. After that's done, this is what it should look like with the SL and SR installed. For the next step, I need to get the battery out of the battery holder. I'm going to use my plastic tool to get under the battery around this area. It's being held down by some double-sided tape, so I'm going to lift it up until I can grab it. It's a little hard to see it, but these are the 2 spots the tape is located at. I want to disconnect the battery, but before I do that, I'm going to get the battery holder out of the way. Keep in mind that the method I'm using to disassemble the Joy-Cons is by keeping most of the cables connected. I need to get the ZL trigger out, and I'm actually going to use my hand for this one. You can decide to use a prying tool if you want. You just have to get underneath the trigger and then push it up. The trigger has springs underneath it, so just watch out for that. If you lose any of them, the kit does include extra springs. We don't need these at the moment, so we can just put them to the side. Next, I'm going to remove 4 screws. Now I can grab the battery holder and start to bring it up slowly. The ZL switch is connected to the board, so I don't want to accidentally damage it while doing this. I'm going to disconnect the battery from the board with my prying tool. I can get under the cables close to the black connection and slowly start to push up until the battery is disconnected. To take the L button out, I can just grab it and pull it out, but I'm going to make sure that I take it with the spring. Now there's 3 screws to remove. After that's done, I can move this cable out of the way and remove 4 screws. The next step is lifting up the joystick without disconnecting it. There's a dustproof sticker underneath the stick. It's okay if it comes out since I'm going to switch it over to the new front shell. Mine is still there, so I'm just going to take it off later on. I'm going to take this board out along with everything that's connected to it, but I still need one more part that I need to lift up. And that's going to be the rumble motor that's being held down by double-sided tape. I'm using my finger to slowly push up the motor to one side until I'm able to grab it. Now I can remove the motor along with the board and everything else that's connected to it and just move it to the side for now. You can see the double-sided tape under the rumble. If it's not there, it's probably still on the front shell. The next step is taking off the button pads and the dust-proof sticker. The buttons are staying there since I'm not going to use them. With all those steps done, I can bring in the new front shell and start to reassemble the Joy-Con. I'm going to start by putting the dustproof sticker back on. The side that sticks down should be facing towards the Joy-Con. There's also two spots on the sticker that look like squares. One of them would end up being around the top right and the other one around the bottom middle. And the two holes on the sticker should align with the little pieces of plastic on the shell. Now I'm going to use my tool to press down on the sticky spots. If it's not sticking down well enough, you can always use double-sided tape. When that's done, you should end up with something that looks similar to this. Next, I need to cut out the directional buttons, the minus button, and the capture button. Just like before, I'm going to use my wire cutters, and I'm going to be very careful not to accidentally cut my fingers. And I should have a total of 6 buttons that are going to go into the Joy-Con. If you look closely at the spots where the buttons belong, you're going to see little pieces of plastic. Those little pieces are going to help you to know how your buttons are supposed to be placed down. This is what it should look like when it's done. After the buttons are in, I can start to put the pads back on. Now that my front shell is ready, I can place down the board along with everything else that's connected to it. The joystick and the side of the board with the white shape should be facing down when placing it on the front shell. The first thing I'm going to start with is by putting the joystick through the hole that's on the front shell. If your joystick ends up being blocked by the dustproof sticker, you can move your joystick around to get past it. I'm also going to make sure that my cable on the right side doesn't get caught underneath it. After that, I'm going to place the rumble motor back in. Mine still has double-sided tape on it, which is going to help it stick to the shell. Now I can push down on the board and make sure that it's placed correctly. I'm going to secure the board and joystick with 2 screws on each one. When putting the screw on the left side of the joystick, you want to make sure that that cable is out of the way. Now I'm going to secure the board for the minus button and the L button. For this one, I'll be using a total of 3 screws. For this step, I'm going to put in the L button. You can see there's an L labeled on it, just like the original. I'm also going to need a spring, and that's going to go right underneath the button. If your trigger is facing the same way that mine is, the spring is going to be placed on the left side. After that's done, I can place the button inside the switch. It's going to go inside a spot that's in between the minus board and the L board. When placing the L button in, you want to make sure that the edges are inside the shell. I got my L button in, so I'm just going to test it out a little bit. My L button was looking good, so now I'm going to move on to assembling the middle part of the shell. This one is pretty easy. There's only one cable I need to watch out for. First, I'm going to place down the bottom part of the shell, and after that, I need to make sure that my cable on the right side, about half of it is going to be underneath the shell, and then the other half, which has the ZL board, is going to end up being on top of it. That other half of the cable ends up going through a gap around the top right of the shell. Now I can secure it down with 3 screws. I'm also going to adjust the ZL board into place and then secure it down with 1 screw. Now that the middle shell is in, I can reconnect my battery. The black connection on the battery has one side with gold pins. Those gold pins should be facing upward or towards you. The other side should be facing down. I'm going to place it into the connection that's on the board and then use my tool to push it down to make sure that it's in there. After the battery is connected, I can place it down on the battery holder. The side that shows the little plus sign is going to be facing down, and the side that shows the minus is going to be facing up. For the next step, I'm going to need my back shell and also the Joy-Con release button. I'm going to place it into the shell, but I have to make sure that the smoother side of the button is facing downward. On the other side, there's going to be a little piece of plastic that's sticking out. That little piece should be pointing towards the left. Now I'm going to put the rail back on. Once it's placed down, I'm going to secure it with 1 screw on the top left side of the rail. For the next step, I'm going to need the 2 springs that go underneath the ZL button. One of them is going to be placed on the left side of the ZL board. And the second one is going to go on the right side of the ZL board. Now I'm going to grab my ZL button and turn it to the side that has 2 small pieces of plastic sticking out. Those pieces are going to go into the springs, so I'm going to make sure that that side of the button is facing down. After that, I can secure the button by pushing it towards the shell. When that's done, test out your button just to make sure that it's working correctly. For the next step, I'm going to close up the Joy-Con. The inside of the rail is going to be able to slide into the front shell. If the rail went in correctly, you should be able to push down on all sides of the Joy-Con to close it up. Now I'm going to secure it down with 4 screws using my tri-wing driver. My left Joy-Con is finally reassembled and it's looking amazing. After all steps are done, it's a good idea to check throughout the whole Joy-Con to make sure that everything is in place. And also push down on all your buttons to make sure that they're working correctly. Now that I'm done with the left Joy-Con, I can start to work on the right one. The right Joy-Con has a few extra parts, but for the most part, the disassembly and reassembly is similar to the left Joy-Con. I'm going to start by removing 4 screws from the back shell using the tri-wing driver. Next, I need to get in between the shell and the rail. I'm using my plastic triangle tool to help me create an opening. Once it opens up, you want to do the same on the other sides. The rail is connected to the front shell and back shell, so you don't want to pull away the shells from each other just yet. What I can do is lift up the back shell and move it to the side while it's still connected. I'm going to remove one screw that's on the top right of the rail. After that, I can remove the back shell. And then remove the release button from the back shell. I'm going to swap out the SR and SL buttons for the new ones. First, I need to remove 2 screws on the board attached to the rail. After that, I'm going to use my tweezers to remove the SR and SL buttons from the rail. I need to cut out the SR and SL buttons from the packaging. Now I'm going to grab the SL button and remove the pad. After that, I'm going to grab the new SL and put the pad in it. I'm also going to do the same thing with SR. If you look at the SL button, it's going to have a little piece of plastic that's sticking out. That little piece should fit into this spot of the rail. When placing in the SL button, the SL lettering should be facing downward and the little piece of plastic should be pointing towards the right. The SR button has two little pieces of plastic that stick out. When placing it into the rail, the SR lettering should be facing downward and the plastic pieces should be pointing towards the right. I'm going to put this board back in place and then secure it with 2 screws. For the next step, I need to move the Bluetooth antenna from the battery holder. Now I'm going to use my plastic tool to carefully lift the battery up. Once I'm able to grab it with my fingers, I'm going to keep lifting it up until it comes out. It's going to feel a little tough since there's double-sided tape under it. You can transfer the tape to the new shell, or you can also use 2 new pieces if you have double-sided tape. Next, I need to remove the ZR button. I'm going to get underneath it and then push it towards the top. There's 2 springs underneath the button, and if you want to use the originals, then keep an eye on them just in case they go jumping off somewhere. After the button is removed, you can also remove the springs. Now I can remove 1 screw to free the ZR board and move it to the side, and then remove 3 screws to remove the middle shell. I'm able to disconnect my battery now, so I'm going to use my plastic tool to disconnect it. I'm underneath the battery cables and I'm carefully pushing up until the black connection comes up. Once the battery is disconnected, I can move it to the side. For the next step, I'm going to remove the L button, and this one's pretty easy. All I have to do is just slide it up along with the spring that's on the right side of the button. Now I'm going to remove 2 screws from the joystick and 2 screws from the board. After that, I'm going to get the rumble motor out of that spot. I'm using my fingers to lift it up, and it feels a little tough since there's double-sided tape underneath it. I'm going to use my tool to lift up the motherboard just a little bit. This is the IR camera, and I'm going to remove it from that spot. Just like the motor, I'm going to use my fingers to lift it up, and I'm going to do it carefully since there's some double-sided tape underneath the cable. Now I need to get the joystick through the dustproof sticker. If you want it to be a little easier, you can decide to disconnect the joystick. Since mine is still connected to the board, I'm being careful not to push it too hard. For the next step, I'm going to remove the motherboard along with all the other connections. This process is a little different from the left Joy-Con since the right Joy-Con has an NFC antenna under the motherboard. Now I'm going to remove all the button pads along with the dustproof sticker. After that, I can grab the new front shell and start reassembling the Joy-Con. I'm going to start by sticking down the dustproof sticker. The sticky side should be facing towards the Joy-Con. The holes on the sticker should align with the little pieces of plastic that are on the front shell. One hole should end up being on the top right of the sticker and the other one should be on the bottom left. It's also a good idea to push down on the two sticky spots. They're located on the squares of the sticker. Next, I'm going to cut out all the buttons from the packaging using my wire cutters. After cutting them out, I should have a plus button, a home button, and the 4-letter buttons A, B, X, and Y. Now I'm going to put the buttons and the pads on the front shell. A is going on the left, B is going down, X is up, and Y is on the right. Next, I'm going to put the pad on for the letter buttons. The two rectangles that are popping out of the pad should be facing downward, and they should also be positioned vertically. Now I'm going to put in the plus button and the pad. Next, I'm going to grab the housing for the home button. This part is included with the kit, but you can also use the original if you like. The original one has the transparent housing with a black button. This one is going to have transparent housing with a transparent emerald green button. On the back of the home button, there's a shape that's going to help you to know how to place it on the housing. Once it's aligned correctly, just push them together and you'll have a completed home button. Once that's done, I can put the button and the pad on the front shell. After doing those steps, I should have 6 buttons, 3 pads, and a dust-proof sticker installed. Next, I need to place down the board along with all the other connections. When placing it down, the NFC antenna and the joystick should be facing down. The first thing I want to do is lay everything down on the shell, and then get the joystick through the dust-proof sticker. Next, I'm going to put the NFC antenna into place. When it's in the correct area, the motherboard can be lowered on top of it. Now I can also put the IR camera into place. Same thing for the motor, but when placing it down, its wires should be on the right side and connecting to the left side. Now I can lightly tap down on the joystick and the board to make sure that they were correctly placed down. I'm going to secure the joystick and the board with 2 screws on each one. For this step, I'm going to need the R button, and a spring that's going to be inserted under the button. The spring can still come off, so I'm going to hold the button with the spring facing up. When placing down the button, the edges are going to go into the top of the shell. And the spring is going to go into a spot that's in between the R switch and the top right side of the board. Next, I'm going to grab my middle shell and place it down on top of the board. But before I do that, I'm going to move the cables so they don't end up underneath the shell. The ZR trigger cable should end up going through a gap that's on the top left of the middle shell. Now I can place down the ZR board and then secure it with one screw. After that, I can secure the middle shell with 3 screws. Next, I can put the springs that go next to the ZR board. One is going on the left and the other one is going on the right. Now I'm going to grab my ZR button, and if I look underneath it, there's going to be these tiny little pieces of plastic. When placing down the button, those 2 little pieces should go on top of the springs. Once that's in place, you can push the ZR button into the middle shell. I'm going to reconnect the battery, but first I need to make sure that the gold pins on the battery connection is facing upward or towards me. Once I got it into the connection on the motherboard, I'm going to use my tool to push it down to make sure that it's secured. After that, I can place the battery on the battery holder. The plus symbol, or the positive side of the battery, should be facing up. Now I can place the Bluetooth antenna into the battery holder. The board slides into a spot that's in the holder, but it comes loose because the cable also needs to be secured into the holder. This is the area where the cable should be placed into. It'll make it a lot easier if you use a tool to push it down. Next, I'm going to place down the release button on the back shell. There's a tiny piece of plastic that sticks out of the button, and it should be pointing towards the right. Now the rail can be placed on the back shell. The holes on the rail should end up on top of these 2 spots. After that, I can secure it down with 1 screw. Next, I can slide the inside of the rail into the front shell and then push the 2 shells together to close up the Joy-Con. And the final step is securing both shells together with 4 screws. After all steps are done, it's a good idea to inspect the Joy-Con to make sure that it's been closed up correctly. and also push down on all your buttons and test them out on your Switch. So here it is, guys. I finally have both of my Joy-Cons customized with the transparent emerald green buttons and shells. It took a while, but it's definitely worth it to have a color that Nintendo doesn't offer for their Switches. But it's not only just the color, it's also the transparency. I'm a big fan of transparent shells, and ExtremeRate has a good amount of them. They also have an LED kit that goes in the Joy-Cons. It has 7 colors and 2 effects to choose from. One of the effects is the slow blink that slowly changes to different colors. And the second effect is a fast blink that quickly changes to different colors. And the reason I mention that kit is because in the future I'm thinking about installing it on these Joy-Cons. Like, comment, and subscribe to the ExtremeRate channel if you're interested on any of their products, or if you just like watching installation videos. Also, feel free to check out my channel if you want to see other installation guides, product reviews, and other kinds of videos. My channel link will be in the description for anyone who might be interested. Before this video ends, I just want to say thank you to ExtremeRate for inviting me to do this installation guide. I'm a big fan of their products, and it's been an amazing and fun opportunity to be able to work with them. Thank you guys for joining me today, and to anyone who's thinking about doing this installation, good luck and have fun.